So, I bought Saints Row 4 the day it came out. I played it at midnight. I pre-purchased it. I pre-loaded it or whatever. I did everything. And I had pretty decent expectations for Saints Row 4. I mean, obviously I knew it couldn't be as good as the first two games, but I figured it could be at least a half-decent game, unlike Saints Row 3. So, I played the game, I finished it, and here's my thoughts on it. Let's just get some background information. Saints Row 4 was developed by Volition. Volition's developed every single Saints Row game, and it's been published by Deep Silver. Now, the Saints Row series has previously been published by THQ, obviously, but THQ went out of business, so that's what happened. So Deep Silver is the new publisher of the Saints Row series. They purchased the Saints Row series for like about $20-something million. But let's just get into review now. The story. Now, I knew what the story was going to be about before I pre-purchased the game, so that wasn't a disappointment for me. I mean, sure, it wasn't a great story, but Saints Row, since the third game, you never really have high expectations for the Saints Row story. I mean, I guess it's kind of creative, but it's not as good as the first two games. But, anyway, you're the president of the United States, and aliens take over, and then that's basically the main plot line. That's how it goes around, and you have to kill the leader of the Zin Empire, or you're going after him, Zinyak. And what turns out is that you're in a simulation after Zinyak captures you in I think it's second mission. So, you're captured after the end of the second mission, and then the third mission you're placed in like a 1950s style thing. And yeah, that's how it goes. You're placed in it, and then it's like 1950 Steelport or whatever, which is the fictional city that the game takes place in. And in the mission after, you're placed in a modern type Steelport with a alien type presence, but it's still a simulation. It's not the real city, for whatever reason. Like, that's what I never got. If aliens are had taken over the world, why do they have a virtual version of it and not the real one? I guess they just try to make it like a sci-fi cool thing, but I don't know. It wasn't really much of an appeal to me. But yeah, so basically, the main setting is in the virtual version of Steelport. A lot of times you're on the ship, but mostly you're in the virtual Steelport. And then the missions, I guess I'll get into those next. Well, the missions are not your standard Saints Row missions. I mean, Saints Row's been, the first two games at least, had basically three storylines across 3 different gangs. And then Saints Row the Third kind of had that kind of thing, except it was more, the 3 gangs were basically one gang. And it was more linear. But this one, you have missions, obviously, the only enemy is the alien enemy. But they mostly, I mean, a lot of them are interesting in a way, you could tell they put a lot of effort into the missions, because if you have to rescue all of your, friends in their simulations, because your simulation's the virtual Steelport, but they have all of different simulations. So, let me go over all the simulations that you go into. Matt Miller's simulation, who is kind of like, the mission in Saints Row the Third, where you have to go into the virtual Decker's world. It's kind of like that, basically. And they have the text adventure, which is awful in my opinion, but I just go through it. It's not really, it's very brief, but it's annoying. And then you have Pierce's mission, which is where you're in the penthouse from Saints Row the Third, and you have to kill a giant monster Saints Flow. And you could tell this Saints Flow, giant monster Saints Flow or whatever it was obviously one of the merges from the original Enter the Dominatrix DLC. You could tell, because he was in the promotional art of the DLC, and they say they were merging the DLC with the Saints Row 4. But the thing is, though, well, I'll continue with the simulations, and then I'll go into complaints. Benjamin King's was my favorite, where you go back to Stillwater, and you get to kill Vice Kings. You get to visit the church, you get to visit, like, the nearby area in Saints Row, and it's pretty good. Like, I enjoy every bit of it. And then you had to kill Big Tony, which was one of the enemies in Saints Row 1, and then Saints Row 4 was, he returned. And you had to kill him. And then Tanya, which is, you killed her at the end of the Vice King's storyline. She comes back and you have to kill her. And it's, you know, I liked it. It was pretty good, obviously, because I'm a big fan of the first two Saints Row games. But we gotta move on, though. There's Asha Odekar or whatever, which is like a new character in the series, who is an MI6 agent, and you had to kill an evil twin of yourself. And then Shaundi mission was in the airplane where Johnny Gat was supposedly killed. But then in Johnny's mission, in Johnny's simulation, it turns out that he was kidnapped by Zinniac after the shooting took place in the plane. So, in Shaundi's, though, you're killing Syndicate members in that plane. Basically, it's a recap of the first mission in Saints Row 3. And, you know, it's cool. But it doesn't end there. It turns into, like, a horror thing in the plane. And, then you wind up in a nightclub, which turns out to be the nightclub that Veteran Child kidnaps Shaundi in the second Saints Row game. And I was like, whoa, I remember this part. Like, I was walking into a nightclub, like, what the hell? And then I was like, wow, it looks just like it. And then, you know, Veteran Child has Shaundi held hostage, except it's not the Shaundi that they changed up. It's the original Shaundi, with a different voice actress, though. But, whatever. But it was still cool to see. However, while those simulation missions are cool, where you go into other people's simulations, the problems start to become within the gameplay. Let's get into the superpowers. The superpowers are only available in your simulation, which could be good or bad depending on who you are. I personally think it's a good thing, because I don't find the superpowers to be needed, but since it's a simulation, you're like, okay, you go with it. But you have different powers. You have the telekinesis, which is obvious. You know what telekinesis is. You have the freeze ray. You could freeze enemies, which is the first one you come with. And, you have a stomp thing, like a super stomp. Like, you stomp your foot in the ground and all the nearby enemies die. And you have a thing where a fire thing, where you kind of like set it up, and then everyone around you turn into fire, and then your bullets turn into incendiary bullets. And there's one more, where you jump all the way in the air, you aim with the right mouse, and then click, with the left mouse, and then it's kind of like, it's the death from above thing. And I think it's pretty good. I mean, the superpowers are okay. They're not really too, they get frustrating when the enemies use them, like the, whatever they're called, the creatures that Zeniac sends out in the simulation. But it just turns into a mess when you realize that Saints Row 4 had a lot of missed opportunities. Sure, I talked about all the fun that Saints Row 4 has, but then you go into the bad things, and you realize this a lot. Saints Row 4 has almost the same exact problems that Saints Row 3 had. I mean, sure, the story was the missions were better, but the missions weren't a problem in Saints Row 3. So much less things to do from the second game in the open world, which kind of takes away from the open world experience, because there are much less activities, much less things to do in the virtual Steelport. Sure, it's virtual, but it doesn't mean anything else. So you realize that it's less of a game, and then you realize that you go into the final mission. Okay, the final mission is long, very, very long. It's at least an hour long, and it's frustrating when you listen to the same exact music for an hour, and the fact that the mission's so long without saving. It's BS. It really is. I can't believe that they did that. And do you know how long it took me to complete the game? It took me 9.5 hours to finish Saints Row 4. That's right, a 9.5 hour game. They said it was longer than Saints Row 3, which is a lie. They basically false advertise, and they already have DLC. They have 2 mission packs out. One of them didn't come out yet, but still. And guess this, they're selling cheat codes for DLC. Cheats are DLC. Yep. They did that. The cheats are DLC. Just think about that for a second. Cheat codes have been a thing in the past decade or two of gaming. Cheat codes have been a foundation. They've been a thing that I didn't use throughout the entire game of Saints Row 4, but I did use them in previous Saints Row games just to add to the experience. Because the cheat codes are like, a lot of them are cool. Like in the Saints, one of the cheats in Saints Row 2 is that you turn into a giant thing. Like a giant, your character's like giant, like he's as tall as a statue. And then like he shrinks into like a midget. And you know, the cheat codes don't necessarily cheat through the game, like they, obviously, that's part of it, but a lot of it adds to the fun. So to sell cheats just proves the kind of practices that the company does, that Volition does. They take out so much, and they rip you off in the process. So Saints Row 4 does have a lot of issues, definitely. Is it a good game? No, it's not. I mean, if it's in the future, if it's for sale, $20 is the maximum I paid for it. Because I paid $50 for the game, and I'm very disappointed with it. It's the shortest game in Saints Row history. It's less of a game than the first 2 Saints Row games, and it probably has as much content as the 3rd Saints Row game has. And it's just such a disappointment. It's such a disappointment. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I have to give this game a 62%. It's not broken. It's not like completely awful that it can't play it, but as a full-fledged game, it's awful. So, thanks for watching my review. And before you complain that there's no gameplay in this video, you can't replay missions in this game. So, I had no way of re-recording game footage or whatever. So, you can blame Volition for no gameplay.